What are you doing here at 6 in the morning? You staying here?
Yes, I'm a guest. Room 512. Please lower your weapon, officer.
You're saying you're FBI?
Check the inner pocket of the bag. Left side, you'll find my badge there.
In the quiet lobby of the Silvercrest Hotel, David Cole froze where he stood. What was that? What the holy? Oh my God. You are FBI. His hands went up slowly as the cold barrel of a gun pointed straight at his chest. The officer's voice sliced through the calm morning air like a sharp blade. Other guests scattered in panic. Some ducked behind pillars. Others ran toward the exits. David's heart pounded so loudly it filled his ears. He had done nothing wrong. He was just walking through the hotel lobby where he had been staying for a week-long undercover job. But Officer Ray Thompson didn't know that. All Ray saw was a black man in a hoodie walking around an expensive hotel at 6 in the morning. And just like that, he made up a story in his head. Before we continue, where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. This story is wild, and you won't believe what happens next. David wasn't just another hotel guest. He was an FBI special agent, working deep undercover on a big money laundering case that stretched across 3 states. The Silvercrest Hotel was the heart of the operation. For 2 months, David had been collecting evidence, taking pictures, recording conversations, and tracking millions of dollars being moved around. He dressed simply on purpose. The hoodie, the worn jeans, the plain sneakers, they were part of his disguise. He needed to look ordinary, like someone no criminal would notice. But he was noticed, just not by the people he was watching. Officer Ray Thompson had come to the hotel that morning for something small, a noise complaint from the 4th floor. He handled it quickly and was walking back through the lobby when he saw David. Ray had been a cop for 8 years, mostly working quiet morning shifts. Nothing much ever happened. But lately, Ray had something to prove. He had been passed over for a promotion 3 months earlier, and since then, he had been trying hard to impress his bosses, making arrests, showing he could be tough. So when he saw David, his instincts, or rather, his bias, kicked in. A black man. In casual clothes. In a fancy hotel. Early morning. Carrying a backpack. To Ray, that spelled trouble. He didn't stop to think. He didn't ask questions. His hand went straight to his gun, and his voice rose with power. Hands up. Don't move. David froze. His FBI training kicked in instantly. He knew what could happen if he made a sudden move. He knew what happened to black men who tried to argue or reach for their pockets. So he stayed calm. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to the cold marble floor. Ray's partner, Officer Lewis Park, ran in seconds later after hearing Ray's call for backup. Lewis didn't know what was going on. He just saw a man on the floor with a gun pointed at him. So he drew his own weapon too. 2 guns, 1 man. The hotel staff stood frozen. The front desk manager, Marisol, recognized David right away. He had checked in 5 days earlier, paid in full, and had been polite every time they spoke. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped. The sight of 2 officers aiming at a guest was too shocking. Her hands shook as she reached for the phone, not sure whether to call the manager or just stay quiet. Ray's voice boomed again. Turn over. Hands behind your back. Do not move. David obeyed. He lay still as Ray pressed a knee into his back, snapping the handcuffs tight around his wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin. His mind raced. Should he tell them who he really was? Should he keep his cover? If he revealed his identity, his mission could be ruined. But if he stayed silent, things could get much worse. Ray searched David's pockets while Lewis kept his gun pointed at him. Ray found David's wallet and flipped it open, looking for ID. David's breath caught. Inside the wallet were both his fake ID and his real one. Ray pulled out the fake one, a driver's license under the name Ellie Matthews. Ellie Matthews, Ray read aloud, trying to remember if he'd heard that name before. He hadn't, but that didn't matter. He had already decided that Ellie was suspicious. He began questioning David, where he was going and what he was doing in the hotel so early. David answered calmly, explaining that he was a guest in room 512. But Ray didn't buy it. He radioed the front desk to confirm. Marisol finally found her courage. She called out that yes, Ellie Matthews was indeed registered in room 512, and he had been staying there for 5 days. Ray ignored her and said he wanted to search the backpack. If you've ever been judged before someone knew the truth, type facts in the comments. Inside that backpack was everything that could blow David's cover: confidential files, a secret phone used only for FBI contact, photos of suspects, and even his FBI badge hidden in a secret pocket. If Ray searched the bag carefully, everything would fall apart. The criminals would find out, the operation would collapse, and David's life could be in danger. He had no choice. He had to speak up. In a steady voice, David said, "Officer, I need to talk to you privately." "This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." Ray laughed, shaking his head. That's what they all say. He yanked David up and started walking him toward the hotel doors. Lewis followed, still alert. David tried again, keeping his voice calm, but serious. "I'm a federal agent." Ray stopped walking. Silence filled the air for a moment before he burst out laughing. Lewis looked uneasy, shifting his feet. Ray had heard this excuse before, people claiming to be agents, doctors, lawyers, anything to get out of cuffs. But David didn't back down. He told them exactly where to find proof. In the left inner pocket of the backpack, under the false bottom. Ray's grin faded. That sounded too specific. Most liars didn't give such clear instructions. Slowly, he opened the backpack. Inside were the normal things: a notebook, pens, and a water bottle. Then his fingers brushed against the hidden seam. He tugged it open. And there it was, a black leather badge case with the words Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent David Cole. Ray's face drained of color. Louis froze too. Both men stared at the badge, realizing what they'd done. The hotel lobby fell silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Ray's hands began to shake. He looked from the badge to David, then back again. He had handcuffed and threatened a federal agent. His career could be over. Lewis was the first to move. He pulled out the key and quickly unlocked the cuffs. David rubbed his sore wrists but stayed calm. Ray handed back the badge with trembling hands. David didn't yell. He didn't threaten to call their supervisor. Instead, he looked around the lobby, at the terrified guests, at Marisol behind the counter, at the cameras watching everything, and said quietly, "Let's talk outside." The three men stepped out into the cool morning air. The sun was rising, painting the sky in gold and orange. David spoke evenly. "I'm in the middle of an ongoing federal investigation. What you just did could have destroyed months of work. If anyone saw that, the people I'm tracking might realize I'm FBI." Ray stumbled through an apology, his face red. Lewis stood silent, knowing they had messed up. David lifted his hand to stop Ray from speaking further. "I don't need apologies," he said. "I need you to tell me why. Why did you assume I was a threat? Why did you pull your gun before asking a single question?" Ray looked down, unable to answer. He muttered something about suspicious behavior, about doing his duty. But even he knew how weak it sounded. Then David asked the question that hung heavy in the air. "Would you have done the same thing if I were white?" Ray's lips parted, but no words came out. He knew the truth. He knew that if it had been a white man in that hoodie, he probably would have just said hello, or nothing at all. The realization hit him hard. Lewis finally spoke. "What happens now? Are you going to report us?" David had every right to, but he also knew his operation was too sensitive. He needed silence, not headlines. He looked at both officers and said, "I won't file a complaint, under 3 conditions. First, you leave right now and forget this ever happened. Second, you don't tell anyone, not your boss or coworkers. Third, he looked directly at Ray, need to think hard about what you did. Because next time, the person you stop might not be FBI. They might not survive your mistake." Ray nodded quickly, agreeing to everything. Relief washed over his face. But David wasn't finished. He said, "Being an officer means having power. But power means responsibility. Check your bias at the door. Treat everyone with dignity. Don't let fear or prejudice guide you." Lewis thanked him sincerely. The 2 officers walked back to their car and drove off. David stood there a while, watching them leave. His wrists still ached, his back sore from the floor. But the deeper pain came from knowing that even his badge couldn't shield him from being seen first as a threat instead of a man. He went back inside. Marisol hurried to him, apologizing again and again for not speaking up. David told her it wasn't her fault. Fear can silence anyone. Then he quietly asked her to erase the security footage from the last hour. She hesitated but agreed, heading to the security room to delete the recording. David returned to his room. He locked the door, dropped his bag, and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands were trembling now, the adrenaline wearing off. He had stayed calm because he had to. Losing control could have cost him his life. He looked at his phone, thinking about reporting the incident to his supervisor. But that would bring questions and maybe pull him off the case. He couldn't risk that. He set the phone down and walked to the window. The city below was waking up. Cars moving, people heading to work, unaware that anything had happened. And for them, nothing had. David took a deep breath. He had work to finish. David didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the barrel of Ray's gun pointed at his chest. The sound of "hands up" echoed in his mind over and over again. He had faced danger before, drug dealers, mob bosses, men who wouldn't think twice about pulling the trigger. But this was different. He had been treated like a criminal by people who were supposed to be on the same side. He tried to shake it off. There was still work to do. His mission wasn't finished yet. The Silvercrest Hotel was more than just a fancy building. It was a meeting place for the biggest money laundering network in the region. People came in looking like business travelers and left with suitcases full of cash, and no one noticed. Except David. He sat at his laptop, reviewing notes, videos, and coded messages he had gathered over the past weeks. He was close to connecting all the pieces. One more meeting, that's all he needed. The final transaction was set to happen in 2 days, and he planned to be there to witness it himself. Still, what had happened earlier that morning left a mark. He could feel it in his body and his spirit. He wondered how many other people had been through something like that, stopped, judged, and shamed before being known. He thought about how easily things could have gone wrong. If he had moved too fast, if Ray had been a little more nervous, he could have been another headline. By sunrise, David had showered, dressed again in plain clothes, and headed out for breakfast. The hotel restaurant was quiet. Marisol, the front desk manager, spotted him and gave a small nervous smile. He nodded back. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said everything: guilt, relief, and respect. David picked a seat near the window. While sipping coffee, he watched guests come and go, families, couples, and business people with briefcases. Everyone moved freely, unaware of the kind of dangers or injustices that could unfold in a place like this. When his food arrived, his phone buzzed. A message from his FBI contact read: "Meeting confirmed. 2 days. 10:00 a.m. VIP lounge." That was it, the final deal. The end of his long, careful mission. He spent the next 2 days staying low and quiet. No distractions. No unnecessary movements. He kept his cover strong as L.A. Matthews, a low-level courier who handled deliveries for some of the men involved in the laundering scheme. Every night before sleeping, he thought about Officer Ray Thompson. He wondered if the man had learned anything from that morning. Would he think twice the next time he saw someone who didn't fit his image of normal? Or would he go back to his old ways, powered by fear instead of truth? 2 days later, the day of the final meeting arrived. David woke early, made sure his recording devices were ready, and went down to the VIP lounge. The air inside was heavy with expensive cologne and quiet conversation. The main suspect, a businessman named Marcus Dean, was sitting at a corner table. Marcus ran a fake import company, but behind the scenes, he was the one laundering millions of illegal dollars through hotels and clubs. David took a seat nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone. His tiny camera, hidden in a pen clipped to his hoodie, was already recording. "Is everything ready?" Marcus whispered to another man. "Yeah. Transfer set. Once it clears, we're done." David's pulse quickened. This was it, the last link in the chain. He leaned back, pretending not to listen, as Marcus placed a small flash drive on the table. The other man slid a brown envelope toward him. David snapped quiet photos, catching everything. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. He glanced down. It was Marisol from the front desk. The text read, "2 police officers in lobby. Asking about a black man in a hoodie." David's stomach sank. It had to be Ray and Luce. If they were back, things could spiral fast. If they saw him again, they might draw attention, or worse, blow his cover completely. David's training told him to stay calm. He kept his head low, waiting for the right moment. Marcus finished his business, shook hands, and left the lounge. David gave him a full 2 minutes before following quietly behind. As soon as he stepped into the lobby, he saw them, Ray and Luce. They weren't in uniform this time, just plain clothes, talking to Marisol. Her face looked pale and tight with worry. Ray turned, locking eyes with David. Recognition flashed across his face. He stiffened, clearly unsure what to do. Luce nudged him and whispered something, but Ray didn't move. David knew he couldn't act like a federal agent. Not here. Not now. Too many people watching. So he pretended not to know them, walking past as if nothing had happened. Marisol caught his eye briefly and then said loudly, "I'm sorry, officers, there's no one here by that name." She turned away from them and picked up the phone, pretending to be busy. David walked out of the hotel doors, his heart racing. Outside, the morning sun felt harsh on his face. He crossed the street quickly and ducked into a cafe. He sat by the window, pulled out his phone, and typed a message to his FBI handler. Operation may be compromised. Possible police interference. Within minutes, he got a reply. Hold position. Don't engage. We'll clean it up. David exhaled slowly. The team was on it. He watched from the cafe as an unmarked car pulled up outside the hotel 15 minutes later. 2 agents stepped out and went inside. They would make sure the police left quietly without drawing suspicion. By noon, he received another message. All clear. Continue as planned. David felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that his mission wasn't blown. Frustration that even after everything that happened, Ray still hadn't learned to let go. Maybe curiosity brought him back. Maybe guilt. Or maybe, deep down, he was still trying to prove something. That evening, David prepared his final report. He uploaded all his recordings, photos, and notes to a secure FBI server. The evidence was solid, enough to arrest everyone involved in the laundering ring. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his temples. His wrists still carried faint red marks from the handcuffs. His shoulders ached from tension. But the real pain was invisible. It was the quiet hurt of knowing that no matter what title or badge he carried, he could still be mistaken for a threat because of the color of his skin. He tried not to dwell on it. He had learned long ago that dwelling on pain wouldn't change the world. Action would. Truth would. Justice would. That night, he slept better. For the first time in days, there were no nightmares, only quiet dreams of peace. The next morning, he packed his bag, checked out, and stopped at the front desk. Marisol smiled warmly this time. "Mr. Matthews," she said softly, using his cover name. "Stay safe out there." "Thank you, Marisol," David replied. "And thank you for helping me the other day." She nodded. "I didn't do much." "You did enough," David said. He left the hotel without looking back. A few hours later, he was at the FBI field office, handing over the evidence to the supervisor, Agent Walker. Walker scanned the files, whistling quietly. "This is incredible work, Cole," he said, using David's real name. "We'll take it from here. Expect arrests within the week." David nodded. "Glad to hear it." Walker smiled. "You look tired." "It's been a long week," David said simply. Walker clapped him on the shoulder. "Get some rest, Agent. You've earned it." David managed a small smile. But as he walked out of the office, the thought that haunted him most wasn't about the case. It was about Ray Thompson, the officer who saw a black man before he saw a badge. He hoped, somehow, that Ray would change. But a small voice inside whispered that people rarely did unless they truly wanted to. David pushed the thought aside and walked out into the afternoon sun. Another mission was done. Another truth learned. 3 months passed since the morning David was forced to the ground in the Silvercrest Hotel lobby. The case he had worked on was now officially closed. 17 people had been arrested, including Marcus Dean, the smooth-talking businessman who had built his empire on dirty money. The news called it one of the biggest money-laundering busts of the decade. At the FBI field office, David received quiet praise from his superiors. "Excellent work," Agent Walker told him. "Your report was detailed, your evidence strong, and your handling of undercover protocol was flawless." David smiled politely, but inside, he felt distant. The job was done, yet the memory of that gun pointed at his chest still lingered. He never told anyone about what had happened with Officers Ray Thompson and Luce Park. It stayed locked in his mind like a secret file he refused to open. Every so often, the thought would come back, the fear, the shame, the unfairness. He would try to shake it off, reminding himself that he had survived worse. But this felt different because it wasn't a criminal who had nearly ruined him. It was another man in uniform. Someone who was supposed to be protecting people, not frightening them. One afternoon, David met a colleague for lunch at a small diner near the office. The place was crowded, filled with the smell of coffee and fried food. A TV mounted on the wall was showing the local news. David wasn't paying much attention until he heard a name that made his stomach twist. "Officer Ray Thompson has been suspended pending investigation after a video surfaced showing the officer tackling a black teenager during a traffic stop." David looked up sharply. The video played on screen, a shaky phone recording showing Ray grabbing a young boy and forcing him to the ground. The boy looked terrified, shouting that he hadn't done anything wrong. The diner went quiet for a moment as everyone watched. Then the news anchor said, "This is not the first complaint against Officer Thompson, according to reports." David sighed and stared at his coffee. His colleague looked over. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," David said softly. "Just thinking." He wasn't surprised. A part of him had expected this. That day in the hotel had been a warning for Ray, a chance to learn and to change. But some people didn't change. They just kept repeating the same mistake until the world finally forced them to stop. David thought about calling the department, about adding his voice to the investigation. He could have easily told them his story, that Ray had handcuffed an FBI agent for nothing. But he decided against it. The video was enough. It would speak louder than any words. Sometimes justice worked slowly, but it worked. He finished his lunch quietly and walked back to the office. As he passed through the glass doors, he caught his reflection, calm, strong, still standing. For a moment, he let himself breathe deeply. He was still here, still doing the work. That night, he sat at home on his small apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. The hum of traffic and distant sirens filled the air. He thought about everything that had happened, the case, the hotel, the handcuffs, and the silent fight that came with being a black man in law enforcement. No matter how high he climbed, no matter what badge he carried, some people would still see his skin before they saw his face. It was an old truth and a heavy one. But pretending it didn't exist would change nothing. David decided that the only thing he could control was his own response. He would keep showing up, keep doing his job, keep treating people with fairness and dignity even when others don't. Maybe that was how change started, one person refusing to act out of fear or hate. He thought again about Ray Thompson. Somewhere out there, the man was probably sitting at home suspended, wondering how his life had unraveled. David hoped he would finally understand what he had done, not just to others, but to himself. Because power without accountability was just another form of injustice. Weeks later, David was called into a new mission briefing. Another undercover case, another web of lies to untangle. As he listened, his focus sharpened. This was where he belonged, helping people, finding truth, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Before leaving the room, Agent Walker stopped him. "Cole," he said, "I heard what you went through out there. You handled it better than most would have." David nodded quietly. "Just doing my job, sir." Walker smiled. "That's what makes you one of the best." David left the office with a calm determination. As he walked through the city streets, he felt both weary and hopeful. Weary from the weight of the world's unfairness, but hopeful that maybe, through his work, he could make it a little better. He passed by a newsstand where a newspaper headline read, "Officers suspended after racial incident sparks debate." People were talking about it now. About profiling, about bias, about justice. Maybe that was something. Maybe that was a start. David stopped for a moment, staring at the paper, then turned and kept walking. The world still had a long way to go. But he wasn't giving up. He would keep wearing the badge, keep going undercover, and keep doing his best to make sure people were seen for who they were, not what others feared them to be. Somewhere out there, Officer Ray Thompson was facing the cost of his actions. Maybe one day, he would change. Maybe not. But for now, the story had moved on. David stepped into the evening light, the city alive around him. The job, the risks, the pain, they were all part of the same fight for fairness. No news crew would ever tell his story. There would be no headlines, no viral videos, and no crowds chanting his name. But what mattered wasn't fame, it was impact. Every case he solved, every truth he exposed, was one more step toward the kind of justice the world needed. And so David Cole, FBI agent, black man, survivor, believer in truth, kept walking forward. Because even in a world where prejudice still whispered in shadows, he chose to live by light. And that was enough. The end.